So first, let me just say, people watching this now, we have like 25 people watching each episode at least. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
That's 25 people that
That's
decided
25
to spend time
human
watching this thing. Yeah.
beings. Now, if you're
Wow.
watching this, I'd just like to say, turn it off. It's about to go south.
Yeah.
But if you are still here after I just said that, then make sure to watch True Detective episode 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We'll be going back a little bit, but we're going to be focused on episode 4. Anyway, man, the direction is really good in this one. Very,
Okay.
very, very, very good filmmaking in this one. The whole scene at the end,
Yeah.
basically this tense battle, is it's brilliant. I don't even know if they had any cuts. There may have been no cuts. If you watch it, and I want to go back and watch it again, but there may have been a 10-minute stretch with 0 cuts. They're just following him. The interesting thing is, a lot of the stuff that's going on is implied stuff that you don't see directly. You know, you don't see any headshots, but you see them shooting out the window. And so it feels like you're really in it because you don't see someone walking up to another person and blowing their brains out. You know, you see a lot of implied violence, and that's really cool. And
Yeah.
then you're following him throughout it, and it's following really it's just following Rust, and it sort of feels like it feels more dangerous. And so I feel like a lot of movies that do violence don't do it well because they go too big too much of the time, and they zip around too much, and it's just staying on one person, following them through the action and disregarding the action to basically saying, instead of making this about the action, we're going to make this about this guy in the action. And that's not what most directors do, I feel. We're going to make it about him, and if we don't see some action that happens, that's okay, because it's not the main objective here. He's in this really a tense situation, basically. So that's, I think, brilliant. And then at the end, when they pull out and do the wide shot, that is an awesome shot because it's clear what that means. Basically, it's saying, look at all these idiots down there with their little guns, their little toys. That nothing means anything. They're just running around like idiots. And it makes it all seem so insignificant and tiny when they pull back like that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Visual storytelling, really good in that last scene.
Yeah. I didn't even think about the what you picked out of the sort of the insignificance of sort of the world eating itself. Then that's just how people act.
But it's the world eating itself, but it's insignificant. Like their problems are tiny. They don't mean anything, and yet look how silly they are doing that. To them, though, in that scene, it's so important. They're people dying, but you see the little gunshots, little beeps of light going off.
Huh. That's cool. That's That that ties into. Contrast the conflict there in the last scene with the conflict that Rust and Marty are dealing with. Sort of this occultic murder kind of implied spiritual battle that they're sort of tackling, and then
slow burn battle.
and the battles that they have within themselves at home with their significant others, and that's cool. That's because when I was watching this episode, I was thinking, well, number one, the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my god, that exactly how I think you feel about the first watch of that scene, because it's intense, and it's sort of that Children of Men one shot, Russian Ark one shot.
Yes, that Children of Men, it's exactly like that scene. It's very similar.
Yeah. I think there's 2 scenes in Children of Men that are one take, or they're one shot. And there's several movies that do that. I think I've noticed maybe a couple of shots where they have a chance for a wipe or something like that. And if you watch it
they
again,
cheat. Dial M for Murder even cheats.
Oh, that's a Hitchcock movie?
Hitchcock the entire movie is one shot, but they found a few creative places to cut it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one movie, Russian Ark is a legit one shot movie, and it's I think it's about 3 hours long, and it is a Russian movie filmed in this museum with all of this art throughout the centuries of Russian, or throughout Russian history. They're a piece of art from each sort of significant event, and the camera is going through the museum, looking at the art, and there's sort of this narrator guy that follows the camera along. But while he's talking about stuff going on, there's all these actors sort of reenacting in the different rooms, all these sort of, I think, different scenes from history. And
That's
they had 3 chances to do it. The first 2 shots, I think, failed within the first 5 to 10 minutes, or even sooner. But then the third one, they just nailed it. And it's a long, long movie, and it's all one shot. And it's
awesome.
been years since I've seen it. But yeah, anyway.
Send me that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Fax it to me if you can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
that's another. It doesn't always work. There are times when it's the right thing to do, though. I think when a director chooses to use it and uses it correctly, it really adds a lot of intensity and makes you feel like you're in it more. Birdman is another good example where.
Yeah.
I didn't really like the story of Birdman. I thought Birdman was kind of a dumb story. I didn't like what happened in Birdman, but I enjoyed the watching experience.
Yeah. And also the contrast of the action of this episode compared to the other 3. The other 3 seem to be more building emotion and tension with dialogue and plot and exposition and sort of mystery. But then this one, it seems like they want to take a break and sort of have a punctuation mark of, okay, this is something that has been almost a release, right? You get the release of an action episode in order to set a different, just like a peak in a valley, in a story.
I think it's needed. It was needed, but it's also very well earned. There's a lot of action in television that's not earned, and it's there. Mm-hmm. It's there because it's sort of a burden that the showrunner feels or the writers feel is a duty to the viewer. I must show them excitement. Whereas this is, listen, we don't really care. We don't really care about you. We want to tell this story as it should be told, and this has to happen, as you said, as a release for the tension that's been building, the relationship between Rust and Marty, the backstory that we've been imagining about Rust and what he, we get a feeling about who he used to be, and we can talk more about that later. I definitely want to, but it's sort of like lifting a film that was kind of on your eyes for the first 3. Not that I didn't enjoy the first 3, because I'm all about slowly moving through a plot. I'm all about dialogue and just pure exposition. I'm all about it. I generally like 12 Angry Men is one of my favorite movies. So it's just the right thing at the right time, as you said. A punctuation is a good way to say it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question of you specifically that I'm not qualified to answer about the series so far overall.
Okay.
And if you can't answer it, then we'll just move past it. If there's no answer, okay. If this was a 3-way call, and if it were you, me, and Carl Jung, what would his commentary on this series be so far? I'm really curious to know how he would be. What would he be adding to the conversation? No pressure.
Oh man, well,
say something smart.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like so. Yeah, well, you've got sort of the anima and the animus. Let's go back to the male-female dynamic first, because I think that's the most important, might be the most important part of the show. Carl Jung's
not in
ideas,
this episode, though, but yeah.
Yeah, I would, and there's a couple of things I would want to point out that happened in this episode, and something that I don't know if has struck you yet, but it seems on this watch through it's striking me.
That insults
Um,
me.
um, is that if you look at the role of women in the show, they're always in a sort of subservient, dominated, serving position. They're all, there's strippers, there's caregivers, nurses. Marty's wife is a nurse. They're daughters, so they're under the authority of parents, and specifically fathers in in the series. You don't really have any, business women. You don't really have any teachers or anybody that stands in sort of an equivalent capacity to the male authorities. As far as I don't even think there's any female law enforcement agents so far.
None.
Yeah, and so again, it's and also so, and I think in this episode that's emphasized, and I'll bring this around to Carl Jung as well. When Marty goes to the strip club to talk to the girlfriend of Tyrone Weems, if you notice when he asks her some questions, then it cuts to her doing her job, on the dance floor, stripping, and she's wearing an American flag bathing suit that she strips away, and the song is playing at the same time. It says it's like cocaine is the business of America, ganja is the business of America, and then she's wearing the American flag and she's stripping, so you've got this idea of America, the identity of America connected to vice and existing off of the taboos and the things you're not supposed to do. And again, looking at how women have been put into specific roles in U.S. culture historically, and then I think the show is talking about now, what that's looking like. That was just an interesting part of this episode. Okay, to emphasize again, female role in U.S. culture, but then in history, the relationship to male dominance of the female aspect. And so Carl Jung would say, well, there's two things going on. There's the anima and the animus. The anima is and they're male and female principles. And I'll try to make it interesting, not just jargon. But so when in like a heterodynamic, when a man projects his ideal, I think he projects his ideal female onto he has a male aspect and he has a complementary female aspect which compensates for all of the male qualities he doesn't have. So you can think of it so a man would have an animus that he projects onto a female, and he thinks, oh, I'm attracted to her, and he sort of, regardless of the truth of the matter, he turns her into an ideal, which is that animus that he has in his head, which is basically the complement to the things that he lacks. So let's say he's really conservative, he would look for a female complement that is sort of wild. Okay. Okay. And then the opposite is true too. If he's really wild, he might look for a conservative complement. Okay. And so then you've got also the anima for the female. She looks around at a male and projects sort of her ideal complement to herself onto whatever male she sort of gets attracted to. And so I think that's something Jung would definitely bring up for the...
What would be the focal point for that comment? Would that be Marty and his wife?
Yeah, that's it seems to be a pretty good example. Yeah, he has to play the part of being conservative, so he looks for wild women. And the conversation that he has with Rust in the bar, I mean, they're pretty. It's like just two dudes, no holds barred, kind of just saying what needs to be said. Like, look, you're acting. You can't smell this from 1,000 miles away or whatever. I mean,
well. Well, Rust is always that way.
True, exactly. Yeah, exactly. As a compliment to Marty, but going back to Marty,
So are they going to get married at the end of the series?
I will remember what you asked me. Remember what you asked me then, and then we'll talk. Well, when we get to the last episode. When we get to the last episode,
if that's where it goes, I'm in, man.
Yeah. So yeah,
that would be a hilarious place to take things.
Don't forget that
Rust and Marty saying their vows at the altar. Cut to credits.
Don't forget that you asked me that, and let's bring it back up at the end of the.
Are you serious?
Discussion. I am serious. So, and it would even tie back into Young. So, yeah. So you definitely get that going on, and going back to sort of the only time you see women to some degree free is when they're sort of like on the bunny ranch. Maybe not there, but
kind of there. Yeah.
Yeah, they're sort of. They do have a different level of agency that they normally don't in other circumstances in the show.
Even when Marty's wife escapes the confines of that rigid male structure, it's implied, and you kind of know right from the beginning that she hasn't really escaped it. That she is, because she's within that structure, she's going to forgive him. They're going to resume their family life, and that plays out, and you see it play out. But it's kind of like an exercise and a release for her emotionally, and yet she's not the type of person to unplug from what is the sort of the status quo, which is her knowing her role, and coming back to her family life, and eventually forgiving him.
Yeah,
she's angry at first, but that's sort of a natural step in the process.
And she doesn't seem like she's necessarily at the whims of social construct, or as the constructs of tradition, as Marty is. Even though
she's definitely she's definitely she's the strongest female character.
And she to a large, she has more volition in her choice to perform that part, to play that role, to wear that mask, to have that persona, as Young would say. Young says that we all wear masks, and we have different masks for different social occasions. So here's my mask of I'm a married person. Here's the role that I play. Okay, I'm a police officer. Okay, I'm a prostitute. Well, who am I when I'm alone, when I'm not around people? And that's when you get to more of the idea of the personal unconscious, the collective unconscious, and the self. So, another thing to bring up with Young would be the shadow. Yeah, I think we talked about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how that would apply to this episode in particular, especially in regards to Rust's very easy transition back into chaos.
Yeah, he's the kind of human that I think Young would say has incorporated his shadow quite well, in the sense that he has, gone down deep, dealt with the dark side of his personality, and come back from the depths to not be consumed by the dark part, and not to resist the dark part, but rather to incorporate it so that it's useful in circumstances where it's needed.
So I think there are two different ways to look at it, at least if you're from the perspective of someone who's only seen up to episode 4 without knowing beyond it. You could say that he's in tune with his shadow, and he's able to sort of swim around in his, maybe the id realm, or whatever you want to call it, and not be consumed by it, as you said, and sort of use it to his own end. Or he's a junkie for danger, because and I'm not quite sure yet actually. I'm not sure if he is balanced in that sense, that he's embraced his dark side and he's able to use his darkness to get where he wants to go, or if he is so emotionally detached from the world that he's just glad to have something extremely dangerous to take part in as a way to tether him a little bit more closely to the world and not float away into space. And I'm not sure which one it is. He's not. I don't think he's a junkie in any sense. In the drug sense, he does a lot of drugs, but actually the drugs are a way to just make sure that the people he's with, a way to sort of let them know that he's in with them, right? I don't even think he cares about that. I think his drug is the danger of being undercover there and being back to the person he used to be, Crash, the person who lived for 4 years undercover and probably did all kinds of stuff. So what I'm not sure about is whether he's come out of it and is now using it to accomplish something, or whether he's doing it because he wants to feel the high of that danger again. I'm not sure. Yeah.
It might be interesting to try to think about, well, what do we know about him that we could attribute, or what would be his motivation to do any of this at all, to keep, as he says in the interview room, to remain a part of the body, right? Yeah. I'm just trying to stay a part of the body. What's his motivation? What's his drive? Because if he has none, he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't pursue the case. He wouldn't pursue trying to solve the murders. And so, I mean, I know what it is, but I mean, how can you think of?
Okay, so he's detached because he's been through so much after losing his daughter and losing his wife, but I think more so losing his daughter. And I think there's even a flashback to his daughter. Is there not a cut to his daughter for a moment? Isn't there? There's not. Mm-hmm. There's someone else. Okay, anyway. There's, I think he has a need to stay tethered to the world because he's gone so far into the abyss that he could, if he let go, he could just fly away into space. But the reason, maybe the reason that he's connected to crime is that he sort of feels like maybe there's some sort of universe ledger, and he owes the universe ledger something in the black to compensate for something that's in the red for himself in some way. And maybe that has a connection to his daughter, but maybe it doesn't. I accidentally watched episode 5, so I know that there is something about children, and there's something there. Yeah. But I'm not sure what. So other than his need to feel connected to the world so that he doesn't float away, and maybe that having something to do with the loss of his daughter, I'm not really sure.
Yeah. I'd say that's a good guess. I mean, even just the things that he repeats up till now. Remember the conversation in this episode that he has with Maggie in the diner, and she says, "Oh, you must have been a great husband," and he walks away. So she hit a raw spot, and
right. That was not characteristic of him, actually, to walk away. He would just say, normally.
All right. Just grab a Lone Star.
Yeah. No, not yet. Let's wait on the Lone Stars. Grab 2 cigarettes at the same time.
Yeah, like in a chain, like in a cartoon.
Well, I don't know about that. Yeah, right. So she definitely hit a point there, and she did leave.
Yeah.
His wife did leave him. So yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
and
so.
it seems
But he also has a point.
has a point where
He brings that up with her, right?
yeah,
He has a tendency to say things that are true, that make people hurt, because most people don't want to hear things that are true. They go to diners to meet people, to hear people say, "Oh, I'm so sorry about all that." But he doesn't have the capacity to empathize. Well, he has the capacity to empathize. He doesn't have the capacity to satiate the need for false compassion. Maybe that's what it is. He doesn't have the ability, at least very well sometimes, to comfort those who are struggling. And sometimes he tends to just say what is true. And he says, well,
yeah,
the purpose of marriage is to have children, and beyond that, nothing makes sense. And of course this happened, basically. There's no other purpose. And so men are weak creatures. They will do this sort of thing, which is a clear indication that will be resolved, and that they're going to, they will get back together. That's pretty clear from that statement. And she knows it, and it's sort of known. That's my feeling. That's sort of in the subtext.
Yeah.
And she just wants to go through her period of anger. But that's because she has a family, because they have kids. She has to go through that period, and then it gets better. But and I don't know what happens at the end, obviously, but clearly something happens, because he seems to suggest that he's not married anymore at the end in the interviews. But yeah, I think what he said to her is basically, this is the way that human beings are, and it's not what she wanted to hear in that moment, because she was hurt by what he said, which is probably true, caused her to then, because she's very astute, pick out something about him that is exactly on his maybe one of three weak spots. One of which may be something happened beyond just his daughter dying, something more, maybe something about his marriage, and there are more details about how they got separated, or his, I guess his other weak point would be maybe he enjoys getting back to crash mode a little too much. I'm not sure about that one yet. I'm really not sure. I'm curious to see if crash mode is what I'm really interested to see is if crash mode is his default condition and that's what he wants to be, or if that is something that he's putting on for the sake of pursuing justice and pursuing the case. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, and time will tell how much agency he has in wearing whichever mask. Does he wear the mask, or does the mask wear him? Kind of thing. Which is all Jung. That's all Carl Jung. Animus, shadow. Yeah, I don't know. Those are two pretty, I think, blatant things that are pretty Jungian in this episode, and probably up till now. Yeah.
How much do you think he enjoys getting back into the thick of things? Because there was a moment when I was watching where it almost was like a switch was flipped.
Yeah.
I could almost hear it. It was like a
yeah.
And then his eyes changed, and he got really he knew exactly what to do. Started injecting himself with cayenne pepper, and he was going for it. And
it was meta acting. Because it's Matthew McConaughey playing.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and actually, the one of the interviews I listened to with Matthew McConaughey was it's one of the points in the story that if you told Matthew McConaughey how you perceived it, it was like a switch, like a switch was flipped. Then Matthew McConaughey would be like, whew, man, I'm glad that's how it looked on screen, because even he mentioned sort of the tone that Rust has is just calm and
Hmm.
kind of cool. But then Crash comes out, and McConaughey was saying, "Yeah, I hope that when
It's
that
pretty.
it's that apparent and it's that drastic, it's that dramatic in contrast to Rust normally." So
There's an intensity that comes out that he. And the reason that I say that I don't know if it's a fix for him or if it's just a mask he's putting on is because it looks pretty. He looks pretty excited about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he seems to be. He doesn't seem scared about anything. He's enjoying every single moment of it.
Yeah,
Very much.
yeah. To me,
When he's describing the face peeling, he's describing that. There's
yeah,
no fear on his. He's relishing everything that he says, and he's watching Marty's expression to see if he scares him. It's suddenly like the Zeppelin's flying at 20,000 feet and then suddenly comes down to 10 feet, and he's really close to the ground now. He's getting something that he really missed, that he got to experience for a long period of time.
Do you think that ever happens with sort of real drunken Buddhas in real life, where they can sort of perceive how detached they are, and they know how far or how attached other people are, and they can almost observe their capacity to reattach if they need to, knowing that they have the capacity to detach again, and kind of revel in almost like a prideful reveling in their own ability to look how far I've moved up the chakra ladder.
Let's not bring that shit into this, please.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so do you know anybody? Can you think of anybody that?
I do have a specific example. I would say in general for most real humans, I don't think that happens so much. I think I've seen naughty monks. I've actually seen them with my eyes getting prostitutes and smoking cigarettes, but it's not because they were doing that. It was because they were legitimately there because their parents made them go, and they just really wanted to smoke cigarettes and get prostitutes. They weren't really detached and then sort of descending to the realm of pleasure, you know. It wasn't that. They were really doing it, you know. But I think Gandalf is a very interesting character.
Okay.
Because Gandalf is I don't know if you've read the Silmarillion, but Gandalf is a god. He's on the same level as Saruman. He's on the same level as Sauron. He's an ancient being who comes from this eternal place, the white shores of I forget, there's a place, but he comes from this sort of eternal place where the gods live, and there is a version of Olympus where the gods live, basically. And they sent the gods sent the elves out to Middle Earth, and the elves traveled on boats to Middle Earth, if I remember this correctly. It's a long time ago that I read it, but the elves are these immortal beings who are then sent to Middle Earth to sort of tend it. And then eventually they will come back on ships, back to their home, where they belong, this sort of immortal realm, right? Mm-hmm. They also then sent these powerful beings to counter this evil spirit, who's basically he's basically a proxy for Satan. He fell, and he shaped the planet and made it dark, and it brought all kinds of darkness to the world. And his name was Morgoth, and he basically walked around with this giant spider thing that took all of the light out of the earth. It's great. If you haven't read the Silmarillion, it's awesome.
Cool.
Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
It's dope. It's good. It's very good.
Dope. You had me at dope.
Man, it's so dope.
Is it rad?
It is. It's almost rad, but it's definitely dope.
All right. Okay. But still on board.
Yeah. It's hella good. Anyway, so they sent. I think it was 5 immortal beings that are more powerful than elves, sort of like demigods, to Middle Earth to counter Morgoth, this fallen original immortal being. And they became the 5 wizards. Saruman was the leader, who eventually went dark, as you know. And then the 2 others who were blue wizards, they disappeared. Gandalf the Grey. And Radagast, who became this sort of crazy forest-dwelling dude. And Gandalf became so involved in the affairs of Middle-earth that he always knew he was this immortal being and couldn't actually die. He always knew what the truth was, but he convinced himself to get so into the affairs of Middle-earth, befriending the hobbits and really caring about his companions, that it's sort of like he was able to exist in 2 spaces. Knowledge that he was immortal and in no danger whatsoever, but at the same time so deeply connected to events that he could feel fear, feel danger, and protect his friends. And so I would say he is an example to me of that sort of person who willingly inserts himself into the lowest possible orbit in order to experience the real world, and at the same time has the awareness that he can detach at any point.
And that's very Christ-like imagery in the sense that I know I'm immortal, but I'm so intertwined with the affairs of men, which is the same person that Rust alludes to in an earlier episode. It's like, when he says, why do you have the thing on your wall? And he says, has he said that yet? I contemplate that moment in the garden.
No,
where
I don't think he said that yet.
Okay.
But he will.
He will. A little bit of prophecy for you. Yeah. Well, again, it's another sort of, you could probably extrapolate that Rust is then, because he can exist at this upper level, but yet be so engrossed in the affairs of the lower level, then he's kind of a Christ-like figure there. So that's something to.
That's what I hope is the case. That's why I was wondering if it was that or he's just a danger junkie and he's sort of losing it. That's what the question is not answered.
You calling Jesus a danger junkie?
Yeah. He's a sadomasochist.
Yeah. There's some unplumbed wordplay they were just glossing over there, but we'll come back to it someday. Anyway,
why don't we? Do you want to say what it is now?
No, because I don't know. It's unplumbed. I got it.
Oh, I see. We could, we could sort of pound away at it with wooden mallets for about 10 minutes, and it would be really bad, and then we'd finally uncover a gem, and then I would cut out that 10 minutes, and then cut right to the gem, and we would seem like wordsmiths of the highest degree.
We could spend the next 20 minutes driving nails into that one. So, and still not be satisfied.
That wasn't it. This is the 20-minute part.
Yeah. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
All right. So, well, I've got a bunch of questions.
Cool, because I don't.
Shall we get to those?
Yeah, go for it. Because honestly, my mind is. I've got 2 things going on in my head right now. So, man, anyway.
What are those 2 things?
That's
seriously. Literally, the question I have written down in my notes is, what are those 2 things? It's written down. Yeah. It's weird. I wrote it. I literally wrote it down 8 months ago.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah. Prompt me, Luke.
All right. Is there any Freudian symbolism going on with the Iron Crusaders, Rust, and Marty as 3 personifications of Freudian ideals. Sort of, you have the Iron Crusaders. Maybe
Iron Crusaders.
I'm leaving that in. I'm gonna actually increase the volume during that part. The Iron Crusaders.
You're drinking whiskey this episode, right?
Yeah. But that's not why I did that. I was gonna do it anyway. I have that written down in the notes as well. It's all
Get a hold of yourself.
It's all in the notes. I follow a transcript. I'm basically like a music box, and I'm just turning the handle, and everything that happens, everything that I'm doing is pre-programmed.
Such is life.
Yeah. It really seems like we're having a conversation, but we're not. So the Iron Crusaders, and then I just wonder if the Iron Crusaders are meant to represent anything in the story, because they are chaos, basically. They are the id, essentially, of the story, in a way. They're the farthest point. At one point I thought that might have been, if there was that might have been Marty, because he's kind of subject to his biological urges. Yeah. But then this group, which is really they're a scary group, and when you're with them, it feels scary, because you know that this kind of thing actually exists in the world, but you don't really think about it. I never think about groups like this, people who live like this, but it's real. These people represent people in the real world, and sort of I sort of feel that it represents one end of a spectrum. Mm-hmm. And maybe Rust is at the other end of the spectrum. I'm not sure.
Do you think that there's any validity to? Is there the potential to? Let's see. So you set up Rust, Marty, and then Iron Crusaders. That was your.
That's the closest I could come. I think that very clearly Iron Crusaders are the end of a spectrum, and I don't know if Rust
boom, and then you've got the mediator. So you've got Marty, which is law and order, and then you've got Iron Crusaders, which is chaos and crime, and then you've got Rust, which is he's the sort of the one who can go between the two.
And it's possible that I'm doing the thing that I hate, which is reading too far into something that doesn't have an intended meaning. But that's what it looks like to me. And I was glad that they brought that element into it, because they're sort of creating a bracket of extremism that is needed in the series, that makes the scene at the end of this particular episode more powerful. The scene where okay, so I think the perfect scene, okay, this is the perfect scene to represent it. And this is, I suspect, the reason why Marty tries to get in. Okay, so you have Marty, Mr. Law and Order, is confused and emotional. He's like a cute little puppy dog in this episode. He's a little helper man. He's a little helper man in this episode, right? He's very vulnerable, and he's almost cute in this episode. And for the first time in the series, you feel like he's a very likable character. Before, he was this all-American dude who played the game and did what he's supposed to do. He did his job. He cheated on his wife. All the stuff that you're supposed to do. And
Dick Swagger.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And then he. See, I don't know what you said there, but I said exactly as though I knew what you said.
You did right.
Totally. I mean, I agree 100%. No idea what you're saying, though. But I'll say this thing, and then you can say what you want to say. Yeah. He's suddenly disconnected for a moment, unplugged from the everyman channel. Yeah. He's changed channels for just a moment because his wife has found out about his affair. He feels genuinely desperate to get her back. He sees the value of family and sees how important it is to him actually. And then he's in the aftermath of that experiencing a sort of limbo state where he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know what to plug into. He's just sort of, well, I have a partner here. I care about my partner. I'm going to help my partner.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
willing
yeah.
to watch his partner do coke and have a bunch of drugs. He's no longer Mr. Law and Order. He's kind of cool with everything now, and he wants to look at it more carefully, not as though he's beginning his descent into the abyss, but as though he's just curious about what the abyss might look like.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Mr. Law and Order, who suddenly has this compulsion to get into this secret back room that Rust easily got into. So Rust is now in this sort of, as you did this gesture, I think that represents it pretty well, able to move back and forth, easily just slips right into this criminal element. It's very easy for him. He fits in because he's able to dance, because he's embraced his shadow. And
it doesn't frighten him.
It doesn't frighten him, and he's probably enjoying it a little bit. He's able to sort of come down to a lower orbit, and then you have this other person now suddenly curious about what is it that my partner is doing that I've never been able to do, and do I have any chance of ever doing that, or am I always going to be over here? But without the extreme element over here, without the Iron Crusaders over here, that dynamic can't exist. You have to have the magnetic pull of this basically dark group who Marty can join. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, who Rust can join. And if Rust can't join them, then there's nothing for him to move to gravitate to show his ability to move back and forth. That was the scene where he gets in there for a second and sees Rust leave on the boat with them. That moment is the perfect symbol of that.
Speaking of symbolism, there's also the idea of Charon or Charon, the ferryman to the land of the dead, from the shores of the living to the land of the dead. So, there's that thing. And so
there's that thing. That's true.
It's a take it and chew on it. So, because they probably did that intentionally. It's probably to use that imagery is got to be intentional. These guys know their stuff. Yeah. And so, you can think of, and you're hitting on it, and it was a thing I was going to talk about, wait till maybe a little bit later to bring up, but almost you can think of maybe Marty as an initiate, that he is maybe the everyman. He's as a character in a story, he's going to go through a change, or else we don't care about the character. He's going to have some type of conflict and some type of resolution. Hopefully, if he's dynamic, he's going to change. So you're pegging exactly what's happening to him. He's curious about the things that he lacks, and there was nobody to bring those things to his attention until Rust came along, and the murder happened, and this whole sort of new set of characters could then be put up against his own reality, so that he can bounce off, oh, I can't handle this, that means I lack this, and then you see what you lack, and then you have a choice to either push it away or confront it, to conquer it, whatever. So there's that idea of, in some sense, Rust is the Mr. Miyagi to Marty's Karate Kid. So
deep, profound.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
He's a gateway drug.
Yeah, gateway druggie. So sure, there's that. And
but without the chaos of his affair being discovered, he wouldn't have been in the mental state to be able to. It's sort of like the jarring him loose from his status quo state has allowed him to, there's other stuff going on here. How can I be useful? Can I get into this place? And it was stupid of him to do that. Why would he do that? Because he wouldn't have done that, I feel, unless he were sort of in this strange middle state.
Yeah, he sort of lost the rule of his kingdom, because the peons, the people that he has made peons in his life, his wife and his mistress, they've revolted essentially, and the whole world he had constructed for himself his vocabulary of words and actions are now failing him. I mean, look at how much he lost it. I mean, you can see how he really feels about women in the way that he deals with his mistress when he gets home and he calls her on the phone and says, "Tell me exactly what you told her." And then this, the torrent of expletives and calls her a whore and, just the violent acts that he'll do to her for wrecking his life. But he doesn't. Yeah. So eventually that's going to have to hopefully compel him to deal with his own responsibility for his actions in those cases. And so, so all that stuff is thrown him into chaos. And so now he's sort of swimming and sink or swim. So.
Right, exactly. Well, he's trying to swim.
Yeah.
But he realizes he doesn't have the depth to swim. He doesn't have the capacity to swim. Rust has the capacity to swim with ease. He doesn't. He gets thrown out right away. He leaves in not shame, but then he becomes useful later in the episode, and it's sort of a reunion of he becomes the who would be a good mythological figure as the sort of helpful companion. Trying to think of, have you read the Journey to the West?
No.
The Shifu, who's the companion to Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, and he's sort of there when he needs them and able to provide insights and guidance when necessary, when Sun Wukong is in trouble. But he's sort of the ever-present helper, and he's sort of a linear character. He's sort of a flat character, but I think he takes on that role there.
He would be the what's like in the old Batman series, you've got Rust, Alan West, Batman, and then you've got the Robin character.
Adam West.
Adam West, yeah.
Sidekick? Yeah. Is that the word you're looking for?
Yeah. Well, and just Robin in that comic series, the TV show.
Robin is so lame, though. Robin is the lamest sidekick ever.
He's kind of dopey. He's really dopey in that show.
He's very dopey, yeah.
Yeah, kind of innocent and dopey and like a puppy. So
yeah. Did you have the same sense in this episode that he's kind of like a lost puppy, just trying to figure out where he is and what he's supposed to do?
Yeah, because look at his disguise; it's terrible. He's got that kind of newish leather jacket, I think a Pink Floyd T-shirt, and the hat that he wears like he's never worn it before.
Right.
So totally out of his element.
And when he went to the rave, it just seemed like he just didn't know what is the people code? What is the rave? What are these people doing? What is this rave?
But he did well. He was.
Oh yeah, he was able to find his footing there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it seems to be. That was him acting in a driven, confident capacity, and not really. And so.
Yeah.
I wondered why, if there's any significance to the fact that they had white supremacists and then going into a ghetto. So you've got the race dynamic going on in the conflict in the last scene. And I wonder if they chose to write that into the script just to paint as chaotic of a picture as you can, to have sort of maybe the most like two groups that would be so opposed to each other, to build in the sense in us, the viewer, that, wow, this is a really fraught with tension, fraught with danger situation. I don't know, because it's another pair of opposites. You've got sort of you got white and black. You've got just two groups that are diametrically opposed to one another. And maybe that's where the significance of it.
Well, you
ends.
can kind of set that up as a default way to trigger that feeling that this pair of opposites is going to lead to even more tension without even doing anything. I think it makes it stronger. So yeah.
And maybe the mechanic there is that in order to sort of go down into to to retrieve the piece of information or the thing that the key that will get you to the next step in your progress is you have to go to the most fraught with conflict area to get it. Like to get what you need to progress is going to be difficult. So, and psychologically, that's something that, we all go through at different levels at different times in our lives.
Right.
So, and that's the pattern that they use and written into the show to elicit that emotion from us. So, I mean, yeah, it did it for me. I mean,
it's a brilliant scene. It's as a standalone scene, maybe the best directed, maybe best scene in the entire series so far. And also it's interesting how, what's the other guy's name with the guy with the beard?
Ginger.
Yeah, he's called
the
Ginger.
The biker guy.
Yeah. He realizes that he has been basically dominated by someone far more capable than himself. And so I don't think that he's physically weaker, but he's defeated by that situation completely. Yeah. And Rust shows complete ease there. So it's almost a joke that he would have. I mean, he's the one who wants to do that, who wants to pull that score. He's the one who has the idea, right? But once he gets into it and the shit starts hitting the fan, people start getting shot. Suddenly, it's sort of like everybody was on the same plane, and then suddenly Rust becomes the far and away the leader and the master of that situation. He knows exactly what to do. He knows exactly when to do it. He's in complete control of his emotions. Yeah. And the other guy, the Ginger, the guy with the beard, he becomes this sort of soft prisoner that he just walks along with him and just does whatever he says, and that's it.
Yeah.
From that point on.
Yeah.
Then later he just succumbs. He just goes into the car. And he doesn't even try to resist. So he shows that he's a weak person, and that when things are actually dangerous, he will cave. Whereas at that moment, Rust will not cave. Rust will actually turn all the switches on and be in control. He makes the phone call. He knows exactly where to go to meet Marty, exactly which street to go to. He knows where he's going, even though there are people running around with guns and shooting. So, and
the violence that he inflicts is merely to incapacitate, and because he
puts the kid in the bathtub knowing exactly what's happening. He's not looking out for himself even. He doesn't even care about himself in that situation. He just cares about accomplishing exactly what he wants to accomplish. And he's able to rise above it and sort of be omniscient in that situation to see what he would have done if he were to think about it later.
Yeah, and when he gets separated from Ginger, when they go out of the one house, and the two guys kind of get one up on him, I think one guy swings at him but misses, and then Rust sort of knocks him to the ground. The other guy hits him in the back with a baseball bat, and then he basically incapacitates him and incapacitates the other guy. But it's merely to, it's just that he does looking at a situation like, here's a series of obstacles that he emotionally neutral in the situation, and so he is able to basically accomplish a goal, which is that's just
so I think
his character.
That's one of the reasons why Ginger has to be basically a helpless creature in that whole scene, because if you and I were to confront that sort of danger, gunshots flying around, most people if you read about war, and you read about things like World War I, when there are shells exploding all around you, it's easy to say before you do it that you're going to be brave, but as soon as there are actually shells exploding all around you, it corrodes all of that stuff, and you become most people become this sort of not helpless, but I must do whatever I need to do to survive. A lot of the time they lose that ability to be actually fully aware of the situation and just try to escape and try to hide and become almost children. In a sense, become sort of helpless.
Yeah.
And if you read about war, you kind of see that again and again. And some people are not like that, and it brings out true colors in people. Not that the people who don't are cowards, but maybe cowardice is the natural state of most people. Maybe it's self-preservation. And so I think one of the great things about the end scene is that when you make Ginger this sort of bombs exploding around me coward, suddenly realizing that he could easily die, and actually seeing it start to unfold, he becomes that sort of soldier who just starts crying and hides under a tree, you know.
Yeah.
And then that creates a great contrast to Rust, who is in full control of his emotions. Because if we just see an action star fighting and killing people and shooting people like in Rambo, it doesn't feel, you don't appreciate how in control of your emotions you have to be to deal with that situation. You don't appreciate it because Rambo is just this freakish, emotionless sort of superhero person. But when you create that contrast between those two characters, and you have one person who's emotionally collapsing and one who is in command 100% and is able to know who to call, is able to put the kid in the bathtub, is able to know exactly where to run in spite of people shooting at him, then you begin to appreciate how much work has gone into his maybe preparation for this moment, in a sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, I swallowed wrong. I've got some. What do you think about that? Share your thoughts.
That was gross. No. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Thanks for the cover. I appreciate that.
Yet again, we've extolled the virtues of the writers and director of this series.
Well, it's not to do that though necessarily. It's to sort of point out that if you're going to try to show what heroism, what violence does to people, if you're going to try to show that, creating a contrast like that is what you could do.
Yeah,
powerful way to do it. Yeah, that was my point. I'm not trying to necessarily extol the virtues of the right, although they deserve it, I suppose. Yeah,
and sort of seeing the dominance that Ginger has in the bayou, in his own surroundings, when he's at the biker club or when he's in the trailer park where he lives. He's a scary guy. He's just, I don't know, it's an intimidating figure. A little bit of I got a trickster feel from him, but then also a very violent and angry feel. But then you see him collapse when he loses control of the situation. He becomes, he starts to bend at the whims of the situation, where, contrasting Rust,
right?
He's not on either side. He's not invested with the drug dealers in the neighborhood, and he's not really invested with the drug dealers that he has to get a piece of information from. He's more of, okay, I need this piece of information. This is a situation, and I got to get it. So he's the Zeppelin again, to a degree.
Yeah. And then for Marty, do you feel that he's kind of embarking on his own? Is there any hero's journey element to what he's started in this episode, or is that just a blip for him?
I think it is. I mean, again, I think throughout the series, he is on his own sort of initiation. And yeah, I mean, you could draw some parallels to Rust being his Hermes, as Hermes had the symbol of initiation, where Hermes was a marriage of the pair of opposites and could help, somebody who hadn't sort of dealt with their shadow or dealt with the opposing aspect of themselves. Hermes would expose them to that and sort of usher them into the next step of maturity and help them to combine the pair of opposites to become sort of the androgen, which means when you combine the opposing aspects, you become whole and complete, because you find the interlocking, you incorporate the interlocking piece. So whereas right now he tries to, specifically with him and whatever you can extrapolate from it, he's trying to dominate the female aspect, that complement that he rather than dancing with like Russ can, he has to dominate it. So I mean, sure,
that might be shifting slightly. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure yet. It's hard to say because it's the very beginning and it's only one episode, so it's
well,
kind of hard to know. But you do see him later in life, except so far in the interview, it's hard to judge where he is in life because he's just commenting on events,
well, and so to further paint or to give further examples of how he's maybe trying to adopt some of Rust's characters. I mean, in the one scene when Marty moves in with Rust, Marty's standing in front of that little mirror, looking at one eyeball, imitating Rust in his meditation, right? He's saying, "Are you supposed to see both eyes in this thing?" Mm-hmm. So yet again, he like you mentioned earlier, he's interested in aspects of Rust that are attracted to him, and he wants to maybe incorporate it, dabble in the waters a little bit, and maybe hopefully grow a little bit himself.
Did I miss that? Why does Rust do that?
Why does Rust what? Oh, I think he did say it already that Russ says something like, "I like to meditate upon the point in the garden when Jesus decides to basically give up. Like he could have slain all the soldiers, he could have called down a host from heaven when he was on the cross and
just
slain everyone and come down."
You didn't have to say that.
And he said, I like to contemplate self-sacrifice and being able to. So, yeah, I think he said that already.
Maybe he did, and I missed that particular thing. Do you remember which episode that's in when he does that?
1 through 3, one of those.
That's my favorite one.
Yeah, I think. I think it's right after Marty comes over, and in the future or in the present, he's talking about, when I went over to Rust's house, I saw how he was living, and I felt sorry for the guy. And then flashback, and he asks, "Well, what's this mirror on the wall for?" And he says something like, "I like to contemplate the garden." So.
For some reason I can't remember that scene.
Yeah, well, it's
it dozed off.
It's contemplating becoming the willing sacrifice. So. Yeah. And so maybe Marty is on that journey himself to some degree.
Or at least it looks like that from the beginning. It's hard to know, though. It's hard to know where he is actually later in life at this point.
Yeah.
Because he's just a dude sitting at a desk. He seems to still be kind of immature, that he's explaining away a man needs his release or whatever he says.
Yeah.
A man needs to have it. He doesn't seem to have enlightened himself. He seems to often contradict what's being shown. What he's saying is sort of glossing over the reality. And I realize that in the scenes for the next episode 5, they do that intentionally because they have to. They gloss over the reality of the of events. We can talk about it for the next episode where the shootout, the crazy shootout when they were being fired at by AK-47s. That didn't actually happen, but they kind of had to fake it. that had to be glossed over. That had to be lied about. But I think sometimes he still has a lens or a filter that he wears that prevents him from seeing it. Sometimes it prevents him from seeing what maybe a more enlightened person would see. In other words, if he's started to go down the rust path, that reversed itself at some point. He's honest with himself at some points, but at other points he's still kind of deceiving himself.
Sure. Yeah.
Later. I mean, I don't know how it turns out, obviously, but we'll see.
Don't skip ahead to episode 6.
Okay.
Before we talk.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd say I can't remember what happens at the end of episode 5, but anyway, yeah, that's cool.
Is there more? Oh, yeah, this is what I wanted to ask. So there are 3 characters. There's 1995 Rust. There is Rust, who is Crash, and there's Bodhisattva Rust.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your take on these 3 characters and why there are these 3 characters.
Why are there 3?
And if there's any arc that's meant to reveal something about how a person develops, or the reason to show those 3. Because they're definitely 3 clearly defined characters, right?
Yeah.
Pretty clearly defined, seems. I don't know yet, because I haven't seen it all play out. So it looks to me like you have, and I've kind of said this before, but you have a person who is still somewhat reeling from a major loss, who went through a really dark period where he may have actually lost himself to an extent, and then has come out and decided to tether himself to something good and something very real and become a detective. And so that's almost one stage. Step 1 would be to exit the abyss, or to get out of the abyss and to plug yourself into something not chaotic, or something at least productive, but still something that's very intense and something that can tether you to the world, something that's very, very real. And I guess investigating murders would be that. Then
procedure.
All right.
A procedure.
Sure. Yeah, but a procedure that's more intense than other procedures, for sure.
Sure.
Then you have the next, I guess, phase. And in the next phase, he is able to carry some of the things that the dark period, that he got during the dark period, and use them to higher goals. And that would be exemplified by doing all kinds of coke, but somehow not seeming like a coke junkie, doing it for a higher purpose, in a way. You know, he doesn't seem like someone who's about to lose himself and become a junkie again. He seems like he's someone who's in control of himself, knowing exactly why he's doing it. So there, it's almost a step forward. Someone who is able to very adeptly mix or blend his purpose, his goal, with his darker tendencies. Maybe the things that were the I guess the aftermath of the loss of his daughter. And I'm just speculating here because I don't know everything that happened. And then finally, the dark bodhisattva at the end, who's able to look back on it all and detach again, but could plug in if need be, and sort of is now freer than ever, in a sense, because he's been through both stages previously. I don't know. That's just my my feeling. But I don't know where that goes. I watched episode 5, so now I know that maybe other things are happening, but I don't know anything. So
yeah,
he's a suspect.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I remember. Yeah, I remember where it ends. Okay.
Where what ends?
Episode 5. I remember
episode
the
5
shot
ends.
is.
Yeah. Episode 5 ends with him being.
Do you want to mention it if people watch this and haven't watched it yet?
Okay. In episode 5, I think we can say one thing. Spoiler alert. In episode 5, it's not revealed, but suspected that he might have other activities and may be a suspect, and that may be why they're interviewing him for another crime, maybe. Yeah. Which is interesting. Yeah. But it doesn't negate his bodhisattva-ness. It doesn't seem to. I don't know. I don't know what's happening, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I believe he's a goal-driven dude, and he's trying to. I mean, he kind of nailed it earlier to me when he talks about his daughter. I mean, it's still something that's nagging on his mind, and he's still trying to sort of exercise those demons. So if he has a flaw, if he has something that he's beholden to, that has control over him, it's that. It's look at in the first episode. I mean, they pointed out, you know, it's his daughter's birthday when this murder happens, and then he becomes a slave to his emotions, and he gets drunk. He loses control and shows up at the house drunk. So that's his rub. That's his weakness. That's his conflict, and his goal is to sort of repair that damage or come to terms with it or make amends for whatever his role in that situation was. So, and then the character progression, you know, as 1995 Russ, he's gone down into the abyss, and then he's come back up, and he's sort of leveled off, and then Crash, he's like, oh, I want to figure out this case. In order to figure out this case, I have to pull this character that I've put down in the ground back for a little bit. I have to pull that mask out of my wardrobe and wear it.
He wears it. That's the cool thing about it, is that he's putting it on, and knowingly so, without allowing it to consume him, which is the danger. Which is what my question was earlier. Does it consume him? Is he being pulled by that, or is he fully goal driven and actually just pursuing justice in that case? You don't need to answer that, because I'm sure that's going to be revealed at some point.
Well, Bodhisattva, he's not Crash there. He's a drunken Bodhisattva. So obviously the mask didn't destroy him.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So there's that.
But there's a sense that. Yeah, I guess we shouldn't talk too much about episode 5.
Yeah, in all honesty, how long are we? What are we at right now?
3 hours.
Whew. Hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I gotta work on that project for school this week. So, if we could wrap up in 10 to 15, it'd be good.
All right.
I mean,
you're always the one who wants to go.
Well, yeah, I'm not. If I was there with you in New York, I would stay at the coffee shop and we'd be talking, and then we'd go to the bar and we'd keep talking about this stuff. That's what we did last time we hung out together. So.
No, man, it's okay. I get it, man. I get it. Everybody does this.
Why me?
But I do have one more question. A comment and a question, if we could. Do you have time? Just one more thing.
Yeah.
When you listen to something like this and somebody says, I've got to go, it immediately creates, if we can go meta for a second, a sense of tension. That right?
That's the point.
Not right. I know. It's supposed to for me. I don't feel a sense of tension. I will keep you here until you say, "Man, I really have to go." No, I mean for the viewer.
Okay.
Have you ever watched something and one person,
good writing.
or maybe you listen to something, it's a podcast, and somebody says, "I need to go in about 10 minutes." Immediately, that creates this sort of discomfort, this guttural sort of. Man, anything that happens from here on out, it's just unbearable. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
That might be. So that's a good point to bring up. A quote I don't think we got to bring up in one of the earlier episodes when Rust says to Marty, people incapable of guilt generally do have a good time. Mm-hmm. So I feel like some people are going to hear that and be, oh man, God, as the viewer, what's the next stuff coming up? They're going to feel it. They're going to perceive it and feel sort of the tension. But then, kind of like people who can't feel guilt, some people is like, all right, it's coming to an end. Cool. No big deal. They don't have it's a matter of sort of, what you can empathize with maybe,
right.
And what notes hit you and how they hit you, because some people aren't going to notice things in a conversation or in a show, and some people are, and it's going to affect them in different ways.
That's very interesting for me, that the sort of meta things that go on for viewers of things. When you're watching interviews and things like that, do those things hit you? Because they hit me. I'm not, maybe not all of them, but they definitely hit me. For example, if there's somebody who's supposed to be the interviewer and they talk too much, it really, really bothers me. And it frustrates me, and I get really angry. That's why I'm trying to make this clear that these things are discussions, not interviews. Because if this were an interview, this would be a disaster.
Maybe as a discussion, it's a disaster too.
Well, yeah, but probably on a different level that I'm not even aware of. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. And every time I watch it back, I go, Jesus Christ, man, you got to learn how to moderate a discussion and not talk so much. But do you have those? Do you feel that if there's a Q&A or something, one person who's the moderator just talks way too much, and then there's that sort of, oh, come on, shut up and let the person I want to see talk.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like probably the best of the things I've listened to, the best interviewer was a guy named Sam. What's his name? He's got a German last name. He's an illustrator in New York. He's incredible. He goes by Papercake on Instagram. But he does a bunch of interviews with illustrators, and he's fantastic at that never occurring. He asks great questions because he is perceptive enough to know that the interviewee is the interesting thing. And he's like, as the interviewer, I know that the best thing I can do is ask an interesting question or pick up on a line that somebody else said and say, oh, follow that. Tell me more about that. So he's great at that. And
it's a gift.
Well, and for him to be more, interested in something other than himself, something other than hearing himself talk. It's great. Well, just because now I'm thinking,
hey man,
God, how
if you were more interesting, I would only ask questions. But
if I was less interested in myself, I'd probably ask more questions. So,
you've asked me one question in these 4 episodes so far. You've asked a single question, but that's okay because this is on a YouTube channel that I created. So the onus is on me, and I'm the one who has to consider that. You don't have to think about dynamics. I've got to think about the dynamics, and I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never done this before. I don't know I have no idea. So I'm trying to figure it out as well. So it's interesting that we can talk about this. If you're a viewer, just know that we are aware that there are dynamics, even if we don't know what they are.
Yeah.
What if I said that this is actually grape? This is just apple juice, and now that changes everything. Suddenly, the whole memory of the thing that happened before, it's just all shifts. What are the things that cause it to shift?
Sure.
that flub that I had earlier, that wasn't a flub.
Yeah.
It was a scripted conversation point.
Yeah.
So my question was,
yeah, it doesn't bug me. I mean, if I hear it and it bugs me, I just don't listen to it again. If I hear that sort of it's that the interviewer asks too many questions and doesn't let the interviewee talk, or if
talks too much.
Yeah.
I don't really see myself as an interviewer here in our discussions, though. If that were the case, then it wouldn't be like this. I see myself as a person having a conversation with you. And if I have something I want to say, then I'll say it. If it were a strict interview, then it wouldn't be like that. But I sort of think of it as just a discussion about something, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way.
But I wonder. Well, I think I also wonder, because you don't usually see people who have these discussions talk about the dynamics of the discussion as they're having the discussion. So I wonder if that also changes the discussion, if by recognizing it that changes it. Anyway,
everybody's getting bored, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. Jesus Christ!
Why are they discussing the discussion?
Awkward enough. Now it's like double. So the one thing that has stuck out at me that I realized in this one, and maybe it's the affair, and maybe it's just everything in this show is focusing on the darkness of humanity.
Yeah. And
you brought up in the previous discussion, 2 discussions ago, you talked about how the bayou and the rising water levels gives it a tone of the water sort of creeping into the land, and eventually everything is going to be underwater, and it's this sort of effort to remain above it. That sort of stuck with me, that comment. And it makes me feel like it may be an analogy for American life in general, a comment on American life, that at every point there's this sort of constantly pushing force eking into the American life, and the things on the outside of these sort of the fringe, the edge, is just darkness and chaos and giving into your weakness. It's always right on the edge, and it feels to me like it's a criticism of the American norm, an American life in general, that it's just sort of this encroaching darkness.
See, I think when you talk, you sort of just start by answering the questions that I would ask you. So, again, a huge mythological motif. You've got the status quo, the structure, under threat. And like I'm reading in Mircea Eliade right now, and it seems to be the thing that he harps on all the time is the sacred and the profane. And you've got this cyclical renewal of what is known, the cosmos or the cosmos. And so, did you spill your whiskey?
No. It's peanut. It's peanut juice.
Yeah.
It's vervet monkey piss.
Where does it come from? You've always got sort of the order, the tradition, the convention, the conservative, whatever, under threat by the chaotic, the new, the formless, that which wants to renew. And it's always happening. I mean, even in your body, you've got the shedding of cells and the creating of new cells. So why would we think of it as a surprise to see it spiral up or fractal upwards to a society level change? And so,
do you think that's intentional, though? Do you think that the imagery of the fact that it's set there in the bayous, and can bayous be plural? Yeah, it can be, right? Yeah, that it's set there, and it's about crime, it's about infidelity, it's about the dark side of society. Is that, do you think, all an intentional comment on America in particular, the American modern life being this sort of facade that needs to be sort of subsumed by the darkness before it can be refreshed.
Yeah, and that's a pattern. I mean, it's a pattern in every culture throughout history, is that you have yearly feasts, you have yearly sacrifices, you have yearly times of renewal, and that's to sort of shed the disease, shed the sins, shed the old and decaying, and to bring about new life, which you have to go into a period of chaos. You know, chaos comes in, takes everything back to a formless state of sort of unity and oneness, and then you have the reemergence of form and distinction. So string theory, I mean, I think it's the same thing there, when everything kind of, at one point it was just all one tight, dense mass, which was indistinguishable, but then it exploded and you get all these distinct, nameable forms. So yeah, and you know, maybe
and that repeats itself after the universe dies, and after it dies a heat death, and entropy has taken its course, then fluctuations might result in yet another fluctuation of another universe.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Nick Pizzolatto knows that and is writing that. I mean, you'll see it in tons of movies now, and in books and everything. If you haven't noticed it already, that's a recurring major theme, because it's been a major recurring theme in all of our stories since the dawn of storytelling. So yeah, and in some capacity, it seems, huh? What happened?
Okay, go on.
This show is it seems like.
Go ahead. Sorry.
What happened?
Oh, I'm just laughing at how maybe I don't even want to comment on it in the stream. I'll tell you later.
Okay. The reason why this show is effective is because we perceive this sort of indictment of culture that we're used to, of the way that we divide male and female roles, and the way we divide the way we interact with one another across all these different boundaries in pairs of opposites. And we know that those pairs of opposites that we've created are getting corrosive, and in some sense we need to let it go so that something new and better and more effective can be formed out of it. So and the show is sort of an indictment of that. So, and there's lots of shows that do the same thing. Mad Men is a good one. So yeah. I mean, look at male female roles there, it's perfect. So yeah,
perfect. I agree.
I mean, what do you think? I mean, what do you extrapolate anything out of it from? I mean, you said you've been thinking about it, so where have your thoughts carried you on it?
Yeah, I'm really trying to stay white room on, apart from transgressing and watching episode 5 ahead of time, which I deeply apologize for. I said I wasn't going to do that, and I did it. It was a moment.
Why did you do it?
Huh?
Why did you do it?
It was 2 a.m. and I thought, oh man, I got to see what happens next.
Cool.
And then I thought, should I lie about it, or should I just admit it? Should I just say I did? I did. I don't know. It was weakness. I'm a fallible human being.
It's good storytelling, isn't it?
What is? Yeah, it is.
The show.
Yeah, it's dope.
So what do you extrapolate?
Yeah, so I'm trying to. I think I have a tendency. I think you and I have different tendencies. You have a tendency, and I think it's a good tendency, when we're talking about something. You have a tendency to reference what you have learned, because you're a very intelligent person and you're very knowledgeable. You know many things and you've studied many things. And I have a tendency, and maybe it's because I'm not as knowledgeable, I don't know, but I have a tendency to, when I when I see something new, I have a tendency to want to take it away from myself into a tiny little white room with no other influences and just consider it by myself. And I tend not to try to compare it to things that I've learned before, things that I've read before. And I probably should do that. Probably should try to see what maybe motifs might be shared by other maybe other authors' literature. I might benefit from that if I learn how to do that better. But I tend to sort of pull it away and sort of just look at it within a little white room and say, what is this thing? And try not to listen to any other voices. And I don't know why I do that, but for this one, I just have this very clear sense that it's a large commentary on the corruptness of, it is sort of like entropy, isn't it? It is the entropy of culture, and it is the law of entropy. Yep. The law of entropy is and then I tend to make these sort of unfortunate analogies to try to explain what I think. But the law of entropy is that things go from an ordered state to an unordered state if let alone. That's the law of entropy. So it is sort of the law of entropy that you have maybe an American ideal that existed, and an ideal that still exists, but the reality is crumbling, and the institutions of marriage, the institutions of well, let's not say institutions. The stereotypical sort of upright man is now the weakest man, the one who is subject to all of his immediate impulses, and the strong person is the person who exists outside of it, sort of the person in front of the moving zeitgeist, moving forward, carrying it along, is the person who exists outside of this crumbling structure. And that is a commentary to me about how, sort of as you said, that the cycle of society is inevitable, but at the same time there's something outside of that cycle, maybe, or something outside of the crumbling structure that we can look to as a sort of beacon for where to go in the next iteration of the cycle. And that maybe is Rust in this story, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Does it, I mean, it seems like that's the point of the Buddha, is somebody who is sort of, they're outside of samsara. They're outside, reference and other stuff again, they're outside of that cycle of fear and desire and that, that movement and motion. But where instead of, there's the Buddha that could accept or enter into nirvana and disappear, essentially.
Yeah.
Or there's the Bodhisattva, which decides to come back and teach, right? There's the one that decides to put off nirvana in order to come back and assist others.
Grandolph.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, Campbell talks a lot about that stuff occurring throughout history, because he references this at the turn of the 20th century. You had a lot of people keying into that same topic, and the decline of the West. I forgot who wrote it, but Campbell pulled from the guy who wrote that motif of the cyclical nature of society, that in a sense you have that sort of chaotic formation period, which yields sort of the creative culture. And then at its apex, it becomes, it's at the height of its influence and sort of efficacy. And then it starts to decay, much like a human body. You've got the point at which it's firing on all pistons. It's the height of mental and physical capacity. And then it starts to decay. It starts to go away. And in culture, you have that same thing happen, because the environment around that culture changes, right? That the chaos maybe it's always chaotic, and maybe inside of that chaos you have the structure, which is dependable and it's effective, and you can do things and you can exist within it. But then as the things outside of it change, well, the inside has to change too, right? Sort of that structure needs to change, or else it will be consumed. So you've got that cycle of becoming strong to match what is needed for the time, but then times change, and so you have to let the old go away in order to make room for the new. So
because the old rules don't apply. There's a good analogy in I was listening to Hardcore History recently, and I think it was the one on Alexander the Great, and how the Persians entered into a period of basically silk slippers, that they, once you reach a certain place of power, you have someone like Xerxes, who is this basically genius, but isn't able to recognize certain things because of the fact that he exists at the height of or maybe right at the beginning of the point where it starts to go down, because he wasn't the one who built it up and got to the pinnacle. He's on the way down. He's put on his silk slippers and sort of sees everything from the vantage point of someone who's already conquered, which is automatically a weak point, even if you're the strongest person in the world. Even if you are at the height of society, at your civilization, you're on the way down. You've put on your silk slippers because the people before you allowed you the opportunity to put the silk slippers on. They gave you the opportunity to put those on. They couldn't wear silk slippers. You can. But because you're putting them on, instead of keeping on your leather sandals, because you're putting them on, you are basically beginning the cascade downward. Even if you're right there at the top. You're right here, but you're starting to go down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like you're already consuming the store of riches rather than building up new riches. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah.
Smelly old Persians. Any Persians watching this? Prove to me you're not smelly.
There's a lot of...
Go ahead. I was going to make a joke. Never mind. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's a lot of influence from North Africa and sort of some, what would it be, 1,000? Almost hundreds of years old ancient Islamic wisdom around here from, I guess, Ottoman Empire. So when you've got like the height of mathematics, astrology, and all that kind of stuff in literature. So anyway, that's kind of something I want to explore while I'm in Spain, because there's so many points of that high point of culture, especially in Toledo, because anyway, this side trail, but
yeah, it's a really interesting topic, actually, how that particular way of thinking cascaded to what it has become today. Because it used to be that the greatest mathematicians, the greatest astrologers, astronomers, the greatest thinkers, scientists of the day were in the Muslim world.
Yeah.
And that changed a lot. I mean, it changed for specific reasons, but it's an interesting period. We can talk more about that in the future. We should do that.
Yeah, let me go to Toledo first and sort of build up, because that place in Spain, that city, at one point it was where like Jews, Christians, and Muslims existed peacefully for a long time, and it was a big cultural center and an academic center, and also it seems like there was a lot of sort of mystic thinking, so more thinking along the lines of Rust rather than thinking along the lines of, Marty, rigid, specific, definite interpretation of things.
Although I think Rust would say that astrology is bullshit. Yes.
Yeah. Well, in the alchemy discussion of, alchemy as a metaphor for personal progression rather than like divining your fate out of the stars, more of, that was the tradition of alchemy which I think has a lot of bearing on this show, which I'll bring up at the end. But anyway, it's an interesting side trail.
Okay. We'll talk about it later then.
Yeah.
It'd be good if we can debate that, because I can appreciate that sort of stuff, but I'm very against silliness. Like astrology. I think it's insane that astrology was essentially, modern astrology was invented by the man who thought that the Earth was the center of the universe, and that we still...
Copernicus?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No. Ptolemy.
Ptolemy, okay.
Ptolemy, yeah.
Copernicus said the opposite. He was like, no,
right.
it's
Copernican,
sun is the sun.
Yeah. Ptolemy basically wrote 2 books. One book was about what we would call astronomy, where things are, and then he wrote another book about astrology. One book was sort of just discarded because it turned out to be wrong, and the other book is still held in kind of high regard and is the basis of modern astrology, because it can't be disproven, because it's nonsense. But we can discuss it. I mean, it's interesting stuff, but I just can't believe it's still popular. I can't believe people are still interested in astrology today. It blows my mind. Yeah.
I think, maybe if there's any sort of truth to it, it's merely at the point at which it overlaps with truth and other things, and other things meaning just narrative structure. And so
okay, but
that
then,
would be...
But then you're basically a Jordan Peterson person, where you are so smart that you can place something like that into a structure that makes sense, and integrate it into a worldview that is logical, and that people would say, oh yeah, I get it, I know why you're saying that, and when you explain it, it sounds really great. But by doing that, you're reinforcing what 99% of people basically subscribe to 100%, in a dumb way, which is, this week it says I'm gonna have what? And you know what I mean? So what you're doing is buttressing stupidity by intelligently incorporating something that can be discarded and replaced by something else, which is what Jordan Peterson does, I've realized. By reassigning the meaning of God, by taking the meaning of the word God and giving it a definition that he likes, which is the top of a hierarchy, he's basically very, very intelligently making an argument for having meaning and living a life of purpose. He's brilliant. But by doing that, he's then creating this sort of safe space for the rest of people, most people who are not as smart as him, to say, well, Jordan Peterson thinks that, so... And then he's sort of giving permission to beliefs that are probably best left in the 20th century.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think I read even Campbell said a similar thing, where he said, when he was talking about like the rise of, I think, Nazi Germany, that he was talking about how myth and narrative are an incredibly powerful force, because you're activating emotions and thought trains and other people that can lead to, very powerful results. Right. And so when you do it, but if it leads to a powerful result, it speaks to the level of sort of reliability or truth buried way down deep in...
You can hijack that stuff, though.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's the dangerous thing. So it's like, how do we deal with narrative? Do we talk like Peterson in terms of God, so that the people who can't discern like the fine way he uses the word God, so that they then go off and justify, hateful acts against others?
Well, it's not even that. He's just giving permission to believing something that's probably not true.
And I just took it to an extreme. That's why I said that, like, leading to hateful acts. And so I did want to say real quick. I
know you got to go. You had to go like 20 minutes ago.
I do. Well, I want to ask you some more about the teaching stuff, if you don't mind,
Sure.
before.
Do you want to do that on camera?
Well, I want to. So there's a verse in the Bible where it says, "Don't cast pearls before swine."
Yeah.
And I think it's like when Jesus is telling the disciples,
Oh shit.
some people aren't ready to hear some of this stuff you're saying, and so don't cast these gems of truth before people who are just gonna.
It's one of my favorite verses in the Bible.
Seriously?
Yeah.
But you can find parallels in probably Vedic or Upanishadic text and all that stuff as well. It's about, well, even in the structure of the caste system, where you have the Brahman, the
Brahman,
Brahman, Vaishya, Kshatriya, and what's Shudra? What's the bottom?
You got me. I forget.
So you got the four castes, and in
I thought it was 3.
No, it's 4.
I believe you.
Yeah. Anyway, part of the rule, or one of the rules in that, is that the reason we don't tell people at the bottom of the caste system is because they are not equipped. They can't handle the knowledge that people at the top can. I mean, you can look at like the Illuminati, or what the Scientology even has a similar sort of mechanic going on.
Well, that's more switch driven, but yeah. Like,
and it's
that's you can pay to get the higher level there, but yeah, it's the same idea.
It's, secret, forbidden, hidden knowledge. And in some cases, it's, there's things you don't tell kids yet because they don't have the experience to deal with that information yet. Even though that information might be legit and true, they're just not ready to handle it in the way we would want someone to handle it.
So I think that's the primary issue with, let's say, if you were to say to me, we're in a conversation. I think astrology is really interesting. I'd like to find the good, interesting points about it and sort of see what narratives it might tell. I would want to be careful when having that conversation with you, for fear of who might else be in that conversation. Because a lot of people, that speaks to people's weakness. The weakness of humans is to say, this thing gives meaning to my life. It makes me significant more than I actually am. And it strikes this sort of tone of you're important, you're special, and it leads to a lot of other things, a lot of other negative things that we don't have time to go into. But then that's the same issue that I have with Jordan Peterson. If you're intellectually honest, what you should say is, I'm choosing to define God as the highest point of a hierarchy. And that has nothing to do with the actual ontological reality. And what I'm actually saying is, I think that people need to have a purpose and have a story to give meaning to their lives, even if that story doesn't agree with mine. That's what I actually think. But instead, he sort of puts this Judeo-Christian twist on it, and it gives permission to people who say, basically, Jordan Peterson believes this. He's very smart. I should believe it too because he's very smart, right? And that it creates the wrong impression. He should define terms more clearly, but he's the thing that I dislike about him is that he's unwilling to go there and be intellectually honest about it. What he should say is, I'm going to invent a new word. He's not able to admit that when people hear the word God, 90% of people hear the word God, what they think of is a being who lives in the sky. And he doesn't think that. He doesn't think that it's a being who lives in the sky because he's too smart to think that. But he won't say that it's not what he thinks. He should. He should say, I don't think this, but I recognize that 90% of people who hear the word God think about an eternal being who lives in the sky who is omniscient and omnipotent. But he's not intellectually honest enough to do that, and it frustrates me to no end because I agree with so much of what he says.
He needs to start using Grandolph, right?
So you got to use Grandolph or something like that, like I do. Yeah. So that would be my request. I think we should definitely have this conversation later. I'd love to have this conversation later because it's an interesting one for me. But I maybe you can ascribe to some sort of obscure maybe I Ching or something like that, Chinese astrology that other people don't know about, so that people don't start saying, "Oh, Matt, he's a very smart guy. I'm going to start. Maybe I am going to get married next week."
So one of the books I've got that I want to get into, it's one of the Mircea Eliade books. It's called The Forge and the Crucible, and it's specifically about Chinese and Indian alchemy. At least that's what the back of it says. So, and that will touch on the zodiac calendar and all that kind of stuff as well.
There's some interesting stuff there. I mean, the way that people were thinking, the I Ching is a really interesting text, and it's very,
I think I've read a little bit of it.
Complex and subtle, and the way that they sort of map out the date of your birth to the elements, and it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty complex. Anyway.
Yeah.
Let's call it a day.